Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the brutal world of Spartan training camps, where life for young boys was about as cozy as a bed of rusty nails. Picture this: you're 7 years old, standing barefoot on a rocky hillside, the cold dawn biting your skin as grizzled warriors size you up like livestock. The air smells of sweat and olive oil, and you're wondering if you'll ever see your mom again. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this, at least not as the kid you are now. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and what time it is where you are. I love knowing who's out there listening. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not just any kid anymore. You're a Spartan boy in ancient Greece, plucked from home to join the Agoge, Sparta's state-run machine for forging warriors. It's around 600 BCE, and your city-state is obsessed with military supremacy. The moment you turn 7, your childhood ends. No more bedtime stories or warm meals. Instead, you're handed over to the paidonomos, a stern overseer who looks like he chews gravel for fun. He shaves your head, hands you a single cloak, and tells you to keep up or get out. You're not sure what get out means, but the older boys' grim faces hint it's not a vacation. The Agoge isn't just tough love. It's a system designed to break you down and rebuild you as a weapon. Historians like Plutarch describe it as a grueling blend of physical training, survival skills, and psychological hardening. You're thrust into a pack of other boys, all wide-eyed and shivering, and told to march to a camp outside the city. The path is rocky. Your feet bleed, and nobody stops to help. Falling behind earns you a whack from the paidonomos stick. By day's end, you're exhausted. But there's no rest yet. You're given a quick lesson in Spartan loyalty: obey orders, fear nothing, and never cry. Easy, right? Here's a quirky tidbit. Spartan boys were sometimes made to sing propaganda songs about dying gloriously in battle. Imagine belting out a tune about getting speared, all while your stomach growls. Historians still argue whether this was brainwashing or just cultural pride. But either way, it's stuck in your head now. You're taught that Sparta's strength lies in its men, and weak links like you. If you falter, get cut. The elders drill this into you with stories of heroes like Leonidas, who you're told faced impossible odds without flinching. You're not sure if you're inspired or terrified. Your first night in the Agog is a shock. You're herded into a drafty barracks with no beds, just reeds you're supposed to gather yourself. The older boys snicker as you fumble, and one jokes that you look like a lost goat. You force a laugh, not wanting to seem weak, but inside, you're reeling. Food is another rude awakening, a thin gruel that tastes like sadness, barely enough to keep you standing. The paidonomos says hunger builds character. You're pretty sure it just builds headaches as you lie on your scratchy reed mat. The weight of this new life hits you. You're not just training to fight, you're training to survive Sparta itself. The boys around you are your brothers now, but also your rivals. Trust is tricky when everyone's scrambling to prove themselves. You drift off, dreaming of home, but a sharp whistle at dawn snaps you back to reality. Day one's over, and you're already wondering how you'll make it through tomorrow. Every step feels like a test, and the adults aren't shy about reminding you Sparta doesn't need soft boys. You notice some kids whisper about runaways, but the paidonomos overhears and shuts it down with a glare. Nobody knows what happens to deserters, but the rumors aren't pretty. You decide to keep your head down and march on. The Agoge is your world now, and like it or not, you're in it for the long haul. By the end of your first week, your body aches, your feet are calloused, and you've learned to ignore the hunger pangs. You're starting to understand the Spartan way: pain is your teacher, and weakness is your enemy. The paidonomos catches you standing straighter one day and gives a rare nod. It's not much, but it feels like a lifeline. You're still a kid, but Sparta's already carving you into something else. You wake to the same shrill whistle that's haunted your dreams since arriving at the Agog. Your body stiff from another night on a reed mat that feels more like a punishment than a bed. It's daybreak, and the Spartan training camp is already alive with barked orders and the shuffle of bare feet on dirt. You're 8 now, a year into this grind, and the relentless routine of the Agog is starting to feel like your only reality. Mornings blur into evenings, each day a loop of sweat, hunger, and lessons that hit harder than any fist. You pull on your threadbare cloak, your only possession, and join the other boys in a ragged line, squinting against the sun rising over the Taygetus Mountains. The Agog's daily grind is no joke. Historians, drawing from Xenophon's accounts, say it was engineered to churn out disciplined warriors who could march, fight, and die without hesitation. Your day kicks off with a grueling run across rocky hills, your lungs burning as the paidonomos shouts to pick up the pace. Trip on a root, and you're eating dirt while older boys snicker. Faster, or you'll be a helot's lunch, one yells, referencing the enslaved people Sparta keeps under its boot. You scramble up, cheeks burning, and keep running. By the time you're back, your legs are jelly, but there's no break, just a quick gulp of water that tastes faintly of mud. Next comes combat training, where you're paired with a boy who looks like he's been lifting boulders since birth. You're handed a blunt wooden sword and told to spar. Block too slow, and you're nursing a bruise for days. The paidonomos watches, eagle-eyed, praising only those who land hits without flinching. You take a whack to the ribs and bite back a yelp, remembering the rule, no weakness. Between swings, you overhear a quirky tidbit from an older boy Spartans sometimes rub garlic on their shields for luck. You wonder if it's true, or just another way to make you smell worse. After sparring, it's time for education, which isn't exactly reading poetry by a cozy fire. You're drilled in Spartan laws and battle tactics, memorizing them through chants that sound more like war cries. Mess up a line, and you're doing push-ups until your arms scream. The elders say this builds your mind, but you're pretty sure it's just another way to break you. Historians still argue whether the Agogis focus on rote learning stunted creativity or sharpened focus. But right now, all you care about is not collapsing in front of everyone. Lunch is the same sad gruel, barely enough to quiet your stomach's protests. You're told to be grateful Spartans value frugality, and wasting food is a crime. You choke it down, eyeing the older boys who seem to have extra scraps. They don't share, and you're too proud to beg. Instead, you listen as they swap stories about stealing food from local farms, a practice the Agog weirdly encourages. You haven't tried it yet, but the hunger's starting to make it sound tempting. Afternoon brings more physical drills, wrestling, throwing javelins, and climbing ropes that shred your palms. You're smaller than some, so you have to be scrappy, dodging grabs and using speed to stay upright. One boy jokes you fight like a feral cat, and you smirk despite the ache in your shoulders. The paidonomos notices your hustle and grunts approval, a rare moment that keeps you going. By dusk, you're covered in dust and bruises. But there's still one last task, gathering firewood for the barracks. You trudge into the woods with your pack, arms trembling, knowing a cold night awaits if you slack off. As you haul wood back, you catch a glimpse of Sparta's red-cloaked warriors patrolling the valley below. They're what you're supposed to become: fearless, unbreakable, loyal to the death. But right now, you're just a kid, bone-tired and wondering if you'll ever measure up. You collapse onto your mat, the day's grind etched into every muscle. The other boys are quiet tonight, too worn out for their usual chatter. You stare at the barracks' leaky roof, listening to the wind howl outside, and think about home. It's a fuzzy memory now, replaced by this endless cycle of run, fight, learn, repeat. The agoge's routine isn't just about building strength, it's about erasing anything soft in you. You're learning to shut out pain, fear, and doubt. But it's a slow, brutal process. You drift off, the paidonomos' voice echoing in your head. Sparta doesn't need boys, it needs men. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again, because that's the only way forward. You wake up hungry, the kind of hunger that feels like a fist twisting in your gut. It's another dawn in the agoge, and you're still getting used to the fact that food here isn't just scarce, it's practically a myth. You're 9 now, and the Spartan training camp has already taught you that a full stomach is a luxury you can't afford. You pull yourself off your reed mat, the cold air stinging your bare arms, and join the other boys in a huddle around the paidonomos. He's holding a crust of bread so small it looks like a taunt. "This is breakfast," he growls, tossing it to the ground. You all stare, wondering who's bold enough to dive for it first. Starvation is a deliberate tool in the agog, a fact backed by ancient sources like Plutarch, who noted that Spartans believed hunger sharpened a warrior's edge. The idea is simple: if you can't handle an empty belly, you won't handle a battlefield. You're given just enough to keep you alive: gruel, a bit of bread, maybe some watery soup if you're lucky. It's never enough to stop the gnawing, and that's the point. You're supposed to get creative, which in Spartan terms means stealing. The paidonomos doesn't just allow it, he encourages it, as long as you don't get caught. Get nabbed, and you're in for a beating, not for stealing, but for being sloppy. You've heard the older boys brag about their raids on nearby farms, sneaking figs or cheese under the cover of night. One kid, with a grin too big for his scrawny face, claims he once swiped a whole wheel of cheese and hid it in a cave. You're not sure if he's lying, but your mouth waters at the thought. Here's the quirky bit: some boys supposedly smeared their bodies with ash to blend into the shadows during these raids, like ancient ninjas with a side of desperation. You haven't tried stealing, yet fear of the paidonomos' stick outweighs your hunger, but each day pushes you closer to the edge. You trudge to the morning drills, your legs wobbly from yesterday's endless running. The hunger makes everything harder. Your focus slips during combat practice, and you take a wooden sword to the shin. The pain's sharp, but you clench your jaw and keep going. Whining isn't an option. The other boys are just as hungry, and you notice how they eye each other, sizing up who might crack first. You wonder if you look as hollow as they do, your cheeks starting to sink like the hills around Sparta. Historians still argue whether this starvation tactic built resilience or just cruelty. Some say it made Spartans fearless. Others think it turned them into ruthless opportunists, ready to stab a friend for a scrap of bread. Either way, you're learning fast that survival means thinking like a predator. During a break, you overhear 2 boys plotting to raid a helet's garden tonight. You're tempted to join, but the risk of getting caught and the shame of a public whipping keeps you quiet. Instead, you sip your muddy water ration and try to ignore the cramping in your stomach. Afternoon brings a new torture, a long march with no food, just to test your spirit. The paidonomos leads you through thorny scrubland, the sun beating down like it's got a personal grudge. One boy stumbles, and the group keeps moving. No one helps. You want to. But you remember the rule: weakness drags everyone down. By the time you're back at camp, your vision's blurry, and you're dreaming of that crust of bread from morning. Someone jokes it's probably still lying in the dirt, and you force a laugh, though it feels like a betrayal of your own hunger. Night falls, and you're back on your mat, the barracks smelling of sweat and damp reeds. You lie there, listening to the other boys' shallow breaths, some muttering about food in their sleep. You think about home, where your mother used to slip you extra figs when no one was looking. That memory feels like a different life. Now, you're learning to see food as a prize, not a right. The paidonomos' voice echoes in your head. A hungry warrior fights harder. You're not sure if he's right, but you're too tired to argue. You close your eyes, plotting your first theft, wondering if you've got the guts to pull it off. As you drift off, the hunger's still there, a constant companion. You're starting to understand the Agogu's twisted logic starve the body, sharpen the mind. But right now, all you want is something, anything to eat. Tomorrow, you tell yourself, you'll be braver, or at least hungrier. Your arms tremble as you stand in the dusty clearing, the midday sun scorching your bare shoulders. You're 9, maybe 10 now, and the Agog's relentless grind has carved you lean and wary, like a stray dog sniffing for danger. Today's no ordinary drill. It's time for one of the Spartan training camp's ugliest traditions, the endurance tests, where pain isn't just a lesson, but the whole curriculum. You're lined up with the other boys, your heart thudding as the paidonomos paces, his whip coiled like a snake ready to strike. You've heard whispers about these tests, and now, staring at the grim faces around you, you know the rumors were no exaggeration. Whippings and endurance trials are core to the Agog, a fact Plutarch and other ancient writers confirm. Designed to forge boys into men who laugh at pain. The most infamous is the ritual at the altar of Artemis Orthia, where boys face public lashings to prove their toughness. You're not there yet, thankfully, but today's a warm-up, and it's bad enough. The paidonomos barks for you to step forward, pointing to a wooden post where you'll take your turn. The test is simple. Stand still. Take the lashes, and don't cry out. Flinch or scream, and you're marked as weak, a stain that'll follow you through the Agog. You dig your toes into the dirt, bracing as the whip cracks against your back. The pain's like fire, but you bite your lip, tasting blood, and stare at the mountains to keep from buckling. The other boys watch, silent, some with clenched fists, others blank-faced. You get 5 lashes light, the paidonomos says, for beginners. As you stumble back to the line, one boy mutters, "You looked like a whipped mule." You force a smirk, hiding the sting, both from the whip and his words. Humor's your shield here, even if it's brittle. Here's a quirky tidbit: some Spartans believed enduring pain pleased the gods, especially Artemis, who supposedly demanded blood for her favor. During the Artemis ritual, boys sometimes competed to bleed the most, turning agony into a badge of honor. You're not sure if you buy the divine angle, but you're learning fast that pain's currency in Sparta. Historians still argue whether these rituals built unbreakable warriors or just traumatized kids. But right now, your throbbing back doesn't care about the debate. After the whipping, it's on to the next test, holding a heavy stone above your head for what feels like forever. Your arms scream, sweat stings your eyes, and the paidonomos circles, ready to swat anyone who drops their load. One boy collapses, the stone thumping to the ground, and he's dragged off for extra drills. You grit your teeth, remembering the hunger from those endless marches, and somehow keep the stone aloft. When it's finally over, your shoulders feel like they've been hammered by a blacksmith. But you've earned a rare grunt of approval from the paidonomos. The day doesn't end there. You're sent on a run through a thorn-choked ravine, bare feet tearing on rocks and brambles. The goal's to reach the end without stopping, no matter how much it hurts. You stumble, skinning your knees, but push on, driven by the fear of being the last one back. The older boys, already done, jeer as you limp in, one joking that your feet look like raw meat. You laugh it off, but inside, you're seething not at them, but at the Agog for making pain your daily bread. By dusk, you're back in the barracks, every muscle aching, your back still raw from the whip. You lie on your mat, the reeds digging into your wounds, and try to ignore the other boys' quiet groans. You're starting to understand the Spartan obsession with endurance. It's not about feeling no pain, but about eating it and asking for seconds. You think back to that crust of bread you scrabbled for months ago, how hunger felt like the worst thing in the world. Now, your learning pains a bigger beast, and the Agogis determined to make you its master. As you drift off, you wonder how much more you can take. The Paidonomos words echo, "Pain's your teacher, boy." You're not sure if you're learning or just surviving, but you've got no choice but to keep going. Tomorrow's another day, another test, and you'll face it with a straight back, or at least pretend to. You wake to the familiar sting of cold air creeping through the barracks' cracked walls, your reed mat offering no comfort against the hard dirt floor. You're 10 now, and the Agogi's endless grind has you feeling less like a boy and more like a battered tool being hammered into shape. The Spartan training camp doesn't care if you're tired or sore. It demands you get up and keep moving. Today, you shuffle into line with the other boys, your single cloak barely holding together, and notice the Paidonomos eyeing the group with extra disdain. "You lot live like kings," he sneers, kicking over a pile of reeds. "Time to appreciate your palace. You're about to learn just how grim life in the Agogi's squalid barracks really is." Spartan boys lived in rough conditions to toughen their bodies and minds, a practice Xenophon described as central to the Agogi's philosophy. Your barracks is a low, drafty shack on the outskirts of Sparta, shared with a pack of boys who smell as bad as you do. No beds, no blankets, just reeds you gather yourself from the Eurotas River, which are damp half the time and crawling with bugs the other half. You've got one cloak, patched and filthy, to serve as your coat, blanket, and sometimes pillow. The roof leaks when it rains, and the walls do nothing to stop the winter chill. You're told this builds resilience, but you're pretty sure it just builds misery. You start the day hauling fresh reeds to replace the moldy ones in the barracks. A task that sounds simple but leaves your hands raw and your back aching. The riverbank's muddy, and you slip, soaking your cloak. An older boy laughs, saying you look like a drowned rat, and you shoot back that he smells like one. The joke earns a chuckle, but the Paidonomos overhears and makes you both run laps as punishment. By the time you're back, the reeds are piled haphazardly, and you're tasked with weaving them into mats, a skill you're terrible at. Your fingers fumble, and the result looks like a bird's nest gone wrong. Here's a quirky tidbit: Spartan boys sometimes stuffed their mats with thistles to prove they could sleep on anything. You haven't tried it yet, but the older boys dare each other to, grinning through gritted teeth as they lie on their prickly beds. Historians still argue whether this was masochism or just another way to impress the elders. But you're starting to see how Sparta turns pain into a weird kind of pride. You stick to plain reeds for now, though even those feel like sleeping on a pile of sticks. The barracks isn't just uncomfortable, it's a health hazard. No proper sanitation means the place reeks of sweat, mud, and worse. You're allowed to bathe in the river, but only when the Paidonomos says so, which isn't often. Lice are a constant enemy, and you spend evenings picking them out of your hair by firelight. A grim bonding ritual with the other boys. Food scraps, when you're lucky enough to have them, attract rats, and you've woken up to one scurrying across your chest more than once. You're not sure what's worse, the rats or the Paidonomos' whip when he catches you slacking on cleaning duty. Afternoon brings more chores, scrubbing the barracks floor with stones, patching walls with mud, and hauling water from the river. Your arms burn, but you keep going, knowing a sloppy job means extra lashes. The Paidonomos inspects your work, pointing out every flaw like he's judging an art contest. "This is your home," he says. "Honor it." You bite back a retort about how you'd rather honor a real bed. Instead, you nod and keep scrubbing, your knees bruised from the dirt floor. By nightfall, you're back in the barracks, the air thick with the smell of damp reeds and unwashed boys. You lie on your mat, scratches from the day's work stinging, and listen to the wind rattling the walls. The other boys are quiet, too tired for their usual banter. You think back to that crust of bread you fought for ages ago, how you thought hunger was the worst part of the agoge. Now, you're learning that living like this cold, filthy, and bone-tired is its own kind of torture. The paidonomos' words linger. Comfort makes you soft. You're definitely not soft. But you're not sure how much harder you can get. As you drift off, you wonder if you'll ever know a warm bed again. The agoge's teaching you to endure, but at what cost tomorrow? You'll wake up and do it all over, because that's what Sparta demands. You're jolted awake by the paidonomos' shout, your body aching from another night on a reed mat that's more splinters than bed. You're 10, maybe pushing 11, and the agoge's brutal rhythm has you moving before your eyes are fully open. The Spartan training camp doesn't ease up, and today's focus is on learning not the kind with scrolls and quiet contemplation, but lessons delivered through sweat, pain, and the kind of hands-on experience that leaves marks. You pull on your tattered cloak, join the other boys in the chilly dawn, and brace for whatever the elders have cooked up to hammer Spartan values into your skull. The agoge's education system, as described by ancient sources like Plutarch, prioritizes practical skills and loyalty to Sparta over bookish knowledge. You're not learning to write epic poems or debate philosophy. You're learning to obey, endure, and think like a warrior. Today starts with a lesson in stealth, which sounds exciting until you realize it means crawling through a thorn-choked ditch while the paidonomos hurls insults and occasionally rocks if you're too slow. You scrape your knees raw, thorns snagging your cloak. But you keep moving, heart pounding. Get caught peeking above the ditch, and you're out, earning a swat and a lecture on how hesitation gets you killed in battle. You emerge filthy and bleeding, only to be told the real lesson patience. The paidonomos makes you sit still for hours, ignoring the cramps in your legs and the flies buzzing around your cuts. A warrior waits, he says, glaring at anyone who fidgets. You're starving, remember that sad gruel from ages ago, but complaining's a one-way ticket to extra drills. One boy cracks a joke about the paidonomos' beard looking like a bird's nest, and you stifle a laugh, grateful for the moment's levity. But the glare you get reminds you to keep your mouth shut. Here's a quirky tidbit. Spartan boys were sometimes taught to answer questions with one-word replies, a habit called laconic speech. Legend has it, when a rival city sent a long-winded threat, a Spartan replied, "If you try it out," muttering fine when asked how you're holding up. And an older boy grins, saying you sound like a real Spartan. Historians still argue whether this curtness was a cultural flex or just a way to keep boys from talking back. But you're starting to see its appeal. Less talking, less trouble. The afternoon shifts to a different kind of lesson loyalty to your pack. You're paired with a group for a scavenging exercise, sent to secure resources from a nearby grove. The catch, another group's guarding it, and they're not sharing. You and your team creep through the trees, planning to snatch some figs, but it turns into a brawl when you're spotted. You take a fist to the jaw, but land a kick that sends an opponent sprawling. The paidonomos watches, not intervening, and later praises your group for fighting as one. The lesson sinks in your brothers in the agoge are your strength, even if they're also your competition. Pain's the real teacher here. Though, during a wrestling drill, you're pinned hard, your shoulders screaming as the older boy twists your arm. "Yield," he asks. You shake your head, remembering the whipping post and how giving up marks you as weak. He lets go eventually. But the paidonomos notices your stubbornness and nods a rare win. You're learning that Spartan values like courage and unity aren't just words. They're carved into you through bruises and grit. By dusk, you're back in the barracks, the familiar stink of damp reeds and sweat wrapping around you. You lie on your mat, replaying the day's lessons. Stealth, patience, loyalty, endurance. They're not written in ink, but etched in your aching muscles and the cuts on your knees. You think back to that first night in the agoge, how you dreamed of home. Now, home's a shadow, and Sparta's values are your new anchor. One boy whispers about stealing bread tonight, and you nod, ready to join. The Agogi's teaching you to survive, and you're starting to play its game. As you drift off, the Paidonomos voice lingers. Sparta's your mother now. You're not sure if you love her or fear her, but you're learning her lessons. One painful step at a time. You're roused by the Paidonomos whistle, sharp as a blade in the pre-dawn chill. Your breath visible in the air as you scramble from your reed mat. You're 11 now, wiry and scarred from years in the Agogi. And today's agenda in the Spartan training camp promises to leave you with more than just bruises. You pull on your tattered cloak, the only thing between you and the biting wind, and join the other boys in a clearing where the elders wait, their faces hard as the rocks under your bare feet. Today's not about running or wrestling, it's about mock battles, staged fights that feel all too real, designed to make you a cog in Sparta's war machine. The Agogi's mock battles, as noted by historians like Xenophon, are brutal rehearsals for the real thing, teaching you to fight as a unit and ignore pain. You're divided into two teams, each armed with blunt wooden weapon swords, spears, even shields that feel like they're made of lead. The Paidonomos box the rules no killing, but everything else is fair game. You grip your sword, its handle worn smooth by countless hands, and face off against a boy who's got a good 6 inches on you. His grin says he's ready to make you eat dirt, and you're not sure if you're more scared of him or the Paidonomos watching like a hawk. The battle kicks off with a shout, and it's chaos. You swing, block, and dodge, your heart pounding as wood cracks against wood and sometimes flesh. You take a hit to the shoulder, hard enough to make your arm go numb, but you keep moving, remembering the whipping post and how weakness isn't an option. Your team forms a rough phalanx, shields locked, and you feel a surge of pride as you push forward together. But then a stray elbow catches your nose, and blood trickles down your chin. You wipe it off, hoping nobody saw, and keep fighting. One boy jokes, "You look like a red-cloaked warrior already." You force a laugh, but your head's spinning. Here's a quirky tidbit: some Spartan boys painted fake wounds on themselves before these battles, thinking it'd scare their opponents. You haven't tried it. Your real bruises are convincing enough, but you can't help admiring the audacity. Historians still argue whether these mock battles built unbreakable teamwork or just normalized violence among kids. But right now, you're too busy ducking a spear to care. Your team's holding its own, but the other side's bigger boys are relentless, and you're starting to feel like a mouse in a wolf den. The Paidonomos calls a halt, and you collapse, gasping, your body a map of aches. He points out flaws: your stance was sloppy, your shield too low, but also nods at your team's coordination. You're learning the phalanx isn't just a formation, it's a mindset. Alone, you're nothing. Together, you're Sparta. The lesson's driven home when a boy who broke ranks gets a public tongue lashing and extra laps. You're glad it's not you, but you feel a pang of guilt watching him run. Head bowed. Afternoon brings a new twist, a one-on-one duel to settle scores. You're pitted against the big kid who bloodied your nose. He's stronger, but you're faster, dodging his swings and landing a hit to his ribs. The crowd roars, and for a moment, you feel invincible. But then he tackles you, and you're eating dirt again. The Paidonomos pulls you up, saying, "Speed's good, but heart's better." You nod, spitting out dust, and file back to the barracks with the others. Night falls, and you're on your mat, every muscle screaming. The barracks' familiar stink sweat, reeds and misery wraps around you. You think back to the hunger, the whippings, the endless drills. These mock battles are just another layer, teaching you that pain's not just personal, it's shared, part of the bond with your brothers. One boy whispers about sneaking extra bread tonight, and you grin, remembering your own clumsy thefts. The Agogi's turning you into something hard, something sharp, but you're not sure if it's a warrior or just a survivor. As you drift off, the day's bruises throb, but you feel a strange pride. You held your own today, even if your nose still stings. The Paidonomos' words echo Sparta fights as one. You're starting to get it, but at what cost? You're shaken awake by the familiar bark of the Paidonomos, your body already protesting as you roll off your reed mat, the damp chill of the barracks clinging to your skin. You're 11, maybe 12, and the Agogi's relentless pace has you moving on instinct, your tattered cloak barely keeping the morning frost at bay. Today, the Spartan training camp's got something new in store. You're being sent into the wild to hone survival skills. A test that makes the mock battles and whippings seem almost cozy by comparison. You join the other boys, their faces a mix of dread and grim determination, as the Paidonomos hands out nothing but a flint and a warning: don't come back empty-handed. The Agogi's survival training, as described by ancient sources like Xenophon, is all about turning boys into self-reliant warriors who can live off the land. You're marched out of camp, past the familiar rocky hills, and into the dense forests of Laconia. The Paidonomos tells you to hunt, forage, or steal whatever it takes to eat and return in one piece. No food, no weapons. Just your wits and the skills you've scraped together over years of beatings and hunger. You're paired with 2 other boys, and the 3 of you set off, the forest swallowing you like a beast with 1,000 green teeth, your stomachs already growling. Remember that sad gruel you used to choke down, and the idea of finding food feels like a cruel joke. You start by checking the underbrush for berries, but most are sour or worm-ridden. One boy, bolder than you, suggests hunting a rabbit. You track a trail of droppings, heart pounding as you creep through the trees, but your makeshift spear, a sharpened stick, misses its mark, and the rabbit bolts. Your partner mutters, "Nice throw, hero," and you shoot back that he's welcome to try next time. The sarcasm keeps you sane, but the hunger's making you twitchy. Here's a quirky tidbit. Spartan boys sometimes chewed on wild licorice root to dull hunger pangs, believing it gave them an edge in endurance. You find some and give it a try, grimacing at the bitter taste, but it's better than nothing. Historians still argue whether these survival exercises built resourcefulness or just desperation. But right now, you're too focused on not starving to care. You and your team decide to try stealing from a nearby helot farm, a risky move given the consequences of getting caught. You creep toward a small orchard under moonlight, your heart in your throat as you snatch a few figs. The thrill of success is short-lived. A dog barks, and you're sprinting back to the forest, figs clutched to your chest. The next challenge is fire. Your flint's a stubborn thing, and your hands are clumsy from cold and nerves. After what feels like hours, you spark a flame, and the warmth feels like a hug you didn't know you needed. You cook a small fish one boy caught in a stream, its charred flesh tasting like victory. But the forest isn't done with you. A sudden rain douses your fire, and you spend the night shivering under a makeshift shelter of branches, your cloak soaked through. You think back to the barracks' leaky roof and realize you almost miss it. By dawn, you're exhausted, hungry again, and covered in mud. But you've got a small haul, those figs, some edible roots, and a story to tell. The Paidonomos greets your return with a grunt, inspecting your loot like a merchant at a market. He doesn't praise you, but he doesn't whip you either, which feels like a win. You're learning that survival in the Agogi isn't about thriving, it's about scraping by. One hard-won meal at a time. Back in the barracks, you collapse on your mat. The familiar stench of damp reeds oddly comforting. The other boys swap stories of their own hunts, one claiming he wrestled a boar, though you're pretty sure he's exaggerating. You grin, too tired to call him out. The Agog's teaching you to live on nothing, to turn fear into fuel. As you drift off, you wonder if you're getting stronger or just more desperate. The Paidonomos' voice lingers. Nature's your enemy, beat it. You're trying, but the wild's a tough teacher. You wake to the Paidonomos' harsh shout, your body stiff from another night on a reed mat that's more punishment than rest. You're 12 now, lean and hardened by the Agog's endless trials. But today's chill in the Spartan training camp carries a different weight. You pull on your threadbare cloak, its edges frayed like your nerves, and join the other boys in the dim barracks. The air's thick with whispers about today's tasks. But there's no talk of battles or hunts, just a quiet dread. You're about to face the Agog's mental grind, the crushing loneliness and severed ties that hit harder than any whip. The Paidonomos' eyes glint as he lines you up, saying, Sparta's your family now. You're not sure if that's a promise or a threat. The Agog's isolation, as noted by historians like Plutarch, is deliberate, designed to break your ties to home and forge loyalty to the state. Since you were 7, you've seen your family maybe once or twice a year, if that. Letters, hugs. Forget it. You're cut off, surrounded by boys who are both your brothers and your rivals. You remember your mother's face, but it's blurry now, like a dream you can't hold on to. The Paidonomos drills it into your family, makes you soft, and soft boys don't survive Sparta. You try to believe it, but the ache in your chest says otherwise. Today's no different, but it feels heavier. You're sent on a solo task scouting a ridge for enemy tracks, a flimsy excuse to keep you alone for hours. The silence is deafening, just you, the wind, and your thoughts. You trudge through scrubland, your bare feet numb from cold, and try to focus on the task. But your mind wanders to home, to the smell of your mother's bread, the laugh of a sibling you barely remember. You shake it off, but the loneliness clings like damp reeds. One boy, back at camp, joked that you're all orphans now, and you laughed to hide how much it stung. Here's a quirky tidbit. Spartan boys were sometimes made to sleep alone in the wild as a test, with no cloak, to prove they could handle isolation. You haven't faced that yet, but the older boys say it's coming, and they don't smile when they talk about it. Historians still argue whether this solitude built mental toughness or just scarred kids for life. But right now, you're feeling the weight of it. You spot a faint track in the dirt, probably a goat. Not an enemy, and mark it. But the task feels pointless. You're alone. And that's the real lesson. Back at camp, the Paidonomos pairs you with a group for drills. But there's no warmth in it. You're taught to trust your pack. But trust is tricky when everyone's scrapping to prove themselves. During a wrestling match, you pin a boy, but he glares like you've betrayed him. Later, he shoves you during a run, and you stumble, skinning your knee. The Paidonomos sees but says nothing. Another lesson: handle your own fights. You're learning that bonds in the Agog are forged in survival, not friendship. You think back to the mock battles, how you felt strong as a unit. But now you wonder if it's all just a front. Night falls, and you're back in the barracks. The familiar stink of sweat and mud wrapping around you. The other boys are quiet, some staring at the leaky roof like it holds answers. You lie on your mat, the day's solitude still gnawing at you. You try to picture home, but it's fading, replaced by the Agog's grind hunger, pain, and now this aching loneliness. You overhear a boy whisper about running away, and your heart skips. You don't say anything, but you wonder what it'd be like to try. The Paidonomos' words echo Sparta's, all you need. But what if it's not enough? As you drift off, you feel the Agog's grip tightening, pulling you further from who you were. You're tougher now, but at what cost? The loneliness is a wound no whip can match, and you're not sure how to fight it. Tomorrow, you'll get up and keep going, because that's all you know. You're roused by the Paidonomos' sharp whistle. your body creaking as you rise from the reed mat that's more splinters than comfort. You're 12, maybe 13, and the Agog's brutal rhythm has you moving before your mind catches up. The Spartan training camp's air is thick with morning mist, and your tattered cloak does little against the chill. Today's different, though the boys around you are quieter, their eyes darting nervously. You're about to face the Agog's bizarre rituals, strange rites that mix shame and honor to mold you into Sparta's idea of a man. You join the line, heart thudding, as the Paidonomos smirks, saying, "Time to prove your worth." Spartan rituals, as Plutarch describes, are public spectacles meant to reinforce loyalty and discipline, often at the cost of your dignity. Today's rite is the Diamastigosis, a festival where boys endure public scrutiny to show their devotion to Sparta. You're marched to a crowded grove near the altar of Artemis Orthia, where citizens and elders watch like vultures. The task sounds simple. Stand before the crowd, recite Spartan laws, and take whatever comes next. But the next part has your stomach in knots. You've heard stories boys mocked, humiliated, or worse, all to test their resolve. You step forward, voice shaky, reciting laws about duty and courage. The crowd's silent at first, then a few heckle, calling you scrawny, questioning if you're Spartan material. Your cheeks burn, but you keep going, remembering the whipping post and how showing weakness is worse than any insult. Then comes the real test. You're made to run a gauntlet of older boys who swat at you with reeds. It's not as bad as the lashings you faced, but the jeers sting more. One boy yells. You run like a spooked goat and you force a grin, hiding the shame twisting inside. Here's a quirky tidbit during some rituals. Spartan boys danced in bizarre costumes, sometimes as animals, to honor the gods. You're spared that today, but you spot older boys practicing a strange, stomping dance in the distance, their faces grim. Historians still argue whether these rituals were about building character or just public humiliation to keep boys in line. But right now, you're too busy dodging reeds to care. You make it through, bruised but standing, and the Paidonomos gives a curt nod. It's not praise, but it's enough to keep you from crumbling. The day drags on with more rituals singing war hymns in unison, your voice cracking from nerves and exhaustion. The crowd claps, but it feels like they're judging your every note. You're told this binds you to Sparta, but it feels more like a leash. Later, you're paired with a boy for a mock debate, another ritual to test your wits. You argue why Sparta's better than Athens, but your opponent's sharper, and the elders laugh when you stumble over your words. Stick to fighting, one says, and you swallow the embarrassment, vowing to do better next time. By dusk, you're back in the barracks, the day's humiliations replaying in your head. The reeds dig into your back, and the familiar stink of sweat and mud surrounds you. You think back to the mock battles, how you felt strong as a unit, but today's rituals make you feel exposed, like a raw wound. One boy whispers about sneaking extra food tonight, and you nod, craving something to dull the day's sting. The Agog's teaching you that honor comes with shame, and you're not sure if you're earning it or just surviving it. As you drift off, the crowd's jeers echo, mixing with the Paidonomos' words, Sparta tests your soul. You're learning to stand tall under scrutiny, but it's a heavy weight. The rituals are molding you, but into what you're not sure if you're a warrior or just a boy trying not to break. You're startled awake by a low, urgent whisper instead of the Paidonomos' usual shout. Your heart racing as you sit up on your reed mat, the barrack's familiar damp chill seeping into your bones. You're 14 now, hardened by years of the Agog's brutality. But tonight feels different, charged with a tension you can't place. Your mentor, Cleon, looms over you, his scarred face barely visible in the moonlight. "Get up," he hisses, tossing you your cloak. It's time. You've heard rumors about the Cryptaya, the Agogi's secret initiation, but nothing prepares you for this, a deadly mission to test your ruthlessness. You follow him into the night, the Spartan training camp silent behind you, wondering if you'll come back the same. The Cryptaya, as described by Plutarch, is a shadowy rite where select boys are sent to roam Laconia, spying on and sometimes killing helots, Sparta's enslaved underclass, to instill fear and prove loyalty. You're not told much, just to follow Cleon and stay sharp. The air's thick with pine and danger as you trek into the hills, your bare feet silent on the cold earth. Cleon hands you a short blade, its weight heavy in your hand, and points to a distant helot village. "Watch, act if I say," he whispers. Your stomach twists. Killing's not new in theory, but this feels too real. You crouch in the shadows, watching helots move through their nightly routines, oblivious to your presence. Cleon's teaching you to blend into the dark, to move like a ghost. You're reminded of those forest hunts, sneaking figs under moonlight. But this is no game. A helot strays too close, and Cleon's eyes flick to you. You freeze, blade trembling in your grip. He doesn't order a strike, but the moment burns into you. Sparta expects you to be a predator, not a boy. One of your group, a cocky kid, mutters, "I'd have gutted him." You force a nod, but your throat's tight. Here's a quirky tidbit: some Cryptaya initiate smeared charcoal on their faces to look more menacing, like ancient commandos. You haven't tried it, your fears mask enough, but Cleon's grim focus suggests he's done this before. Historians still argue whether the Cryptaya was about control over helots or breaking boys' moral compasses. But right now, you're too wired to debate. You follow Cleon deeper into the hills, your senses sharp, every rustle making you jump. He teaches you to read tracks, to spot signs of rebellion, but it's the unspoken lesson, ruthlessness, that weighs on you. The night drags on, and you're tasked with stealing supplies from a helot stash. To prove your stealth, you slip into a shed, heart pounding, and grab a sack of grain, but a creaking board nearly gives you away. You sprint back to Cleon, who grunts approval but points out your sloppy footprints. "Dead men leave no tracks," he says. You nod, exhausted, and think back to the mock battles, how they felt like play compared to this. The Cryptaya's teaching you that war's not just about strength, it's about being cold, calculated, merciless. Dawn's breaking as you return to camp, your body aching, your mind heavier. The barracks stink of sweat and reeds greets you, but it's no comfort. You collapse on your mat, the other boys stirring, some whispering about their own missions. One jokes that you look like you've seen a ghost, and you force a laugh. Hiding the truth, the Agogi's turning you into something sharp, something lethal. But at what cost? You think of the helot's face, how human he looked, and push it down. Sparta doesn't care about your doubts. As you drift off, Cleon's words linger. You're Sparta's blade now. You're not sure if you're ready. But the Cryptaya's shown you there's no turning back. The Agogi's not just training your body, it's reshaping your soul, and you're scared of what you're becoming. You're dragged from sleep by the Paidonomos' sharp yell, your body aching as you haul yourself off the reed mat. Its prickly edges a cruel reminder of the Agogi's comforts or lack thereof. You're 14, maybe 15. And the Spartan training camp's relentless grind has left you lean, scarred and wary, like a blade honed too many times. Today's air feels heavy, the dawn gray and unforgiving, as you pull on your tattered cloak and join the other boys. The Paidonomos paces, his eyes like flint, and you sense today's lesson is about one thing: weakness, and how Sparta has no room for it. Fail here, and you're nothing, he growls. And you know he means it exile, or worse, waits for those who can't keep up. The Agog's brutal selection process, as Plutarch notes, ensures only the strongest survive to become full Spartan warriors. Weakness physical, mental, or moral is a death sentence. Not always literal, but close enough. Today, you're put through a gauntlet of tests designed to root out any cracks. It starts with a grueling run up a rocky ridge, your bare feet bleeding on jagged stones. You're carrying a heavy pack, and the paidonomos shouts to move faster. One boy stumbles, his pack spilling, and the group leaves him behind. No one stops. You want to help, but you remember the cryptia, how hesitation can cost you. You keep running, guilt gnawing at you. Next comes a combat drill, pitting you against an older boy who fights like he's got a personal grudge. You're smaller, but you've learned to be quick, dodging his blows and landing a hit to his side. He snarls, tackling you hard, and you hit the dirt. Breath knocked out. Get up. The paidonomos barks, and you do, ignoring the pain. A boy nearby whispers. You fall like a sack of figs, and you force a smirk, brushing off the ache. Humor's your lifeline, but it's thin today. The paidonomos watches, noting who falters, and you feel his gaze like a weight. Here's a quirky tidbit. Spartan boys who showed weakness were sometimes made to wear a red cap in public, a humiliating marker of shame. You haven't seen it happen, but the threat looms, and you're determined not to be the one kept. Historians still argue whether this weeding out process created elite warriors or just crushed spirits. But right now, you're too busy surviving to care. The day's tests pile on, climbing a cliff with no rope, carrying logs until your shoulders scream, reciting laws under pressure while the paidonomos looms. Mess up, and you're one step closer to being cast out. The worst comes late in the day, a solo endurance test. You're sent to stand in a river, holding a heavy stone, until the paidonomos says, stop. The water's freezing, your legs numb, and your arms shake. But you grit your teeth, thinking of the whipping post, the cryptia, the endless hunger. A boy nearby drops his stone and is pulled out, his face ashen. You don't know what happens to him, but the whispers of exile sent to live as a helot or worse chill you more than the water. You hold on, muscles burning, until you're finally called back. Night falls, and you're back in the barracks. The familiar stench of sweat and reeds wrapping around you. You collapse on your mat, every inch of you sore. The day's tests replaying like a bad dream. The other boys are quiet, some nursing bruises, others staring into the dark. You think back to the loneliness, the rituals, how the Agog's been stripping you down, piece by piece. Weakness isn't just failure here, it's betrayal of Sparta itself. You overhear a boy mutter about running away, and you tense, remembering the cryptia's cold lessons. You don't respond, but you wonder how close you are to breaking. As you drift off, the paidonomos' words echo Sparta keeps only the strong. You're still here, but the cost is piling up, and you're not sure how much more you can give. Tomorrow's another test, and you'll face it, because failure's not an option. You wake to the paidonomos' piercing shout, your body protesting as you drag yourself from the reed mat, its sharp edges a familiar jab at your battered frame. You're 15 now, a wiry shadow of the boy who entered the Agog, your skin marked by scars and your eyes sharper than ever. The Spartan training camp's dawn is gray, the air thick with dust and the promise of another grueling day. You pull on your frayed cloak, its threads barely holding together, and join the other boys, their faces etched with the same mix of exhaustion and defiance. Today marks a turning point. You're nearing the end of the Agog, on the cusp of becoming a Spartan warrior. But the cost of this transformation weighs heavy. The paidonomos' gaze burns as he says, "Prove you're worthy, or you're nothing." The Agoge's final phase, as Xenophon describes, is about forging boys into full-fledged Spartans, men ready to fight and die for the state. You're no longer a kid scrambling for bread or dodging whips. You're expected to embody Sparta's ideals: strength, loyalty, fearlessness. Today's test is a mock campaign, a brutal simulation of war. You're grouped with your pack, armed with blunt weapons, and sent to defend a hill against another team. The catch: it's all out. No mercy. And the elders are watching. You grip your wooden spear, heart pounding, and charge into the fray. Your team locking shields in a phalanx. You take a hit to the ribs, pain flaring, but you push forward, shouting orders to hold the line. A boy beside you stumbles, and you grab his arm, pulling him up. Sparta fights as one. After all, the battle's chaos. But you're faster now, smarter, dodging blows and landing strikes with precision. You think back to Cleon's lessons, the Cryptia's cold nights, and channel them into every move. The opposing team breaks, and your pack chairs. But the Paidonomos only grunts. Adequate. You're learning that praise is rare, but survival is its own reward. One boy, panting beside you, jokes. We're heroes until we're helots. You force a laugh. But the truth stings. Failure now could still mean exile. Here's a quirky tidbit: some Spartan graduates smeared their cloaks with red dye to mark their transition. A nod to the warriors' iconic red capes. You haven't earned that yet, but the thought of it keeps you going. Historians still argue whether the Agoge's endgame produced loyal warriors or broken men. But right now, you're too focused on proving yourself to care. The day grinds on with more tests: a solo sprint carrying a shield, a recitation of battle tactics under pressure, a wrestling match that leaves you bruised but standing. Each task feels like a final exam, and you're determined not to crack. Night falls, and you're back in the barracks, the familiar reek of sweat and reeds wrapping around you. You lie on your mat, body screaming, and reflect on what you've become. You're not the scared kid who arrived years ago, dreaming of home. The Agoges stripped that away: hunger, whippings, loneliness. The Cryptia, all of it's carved you into something hard, something Spartan, but at what cost? You think of the boy left behind on that run, the helot's face in the dark, the family you barely remember. You're a warrior now, or close to it, but you feel hollow, like a blade sharpened to a brittle edge. The other boys are quiet, some whispering about their own fears of failing. You don't join in. You've learned to keep your doubts buried. The Paidonomos' words echo Sparta's "your life now." You're almost there, but you wonder what's left of you. As you drift off, the weight of your transformation settles in. You're a warrior, but you've paid in pieces of yourself you'll never get back. You're jolted awake by the Paidonomos' final shout, your body a map of aches as you rise from the reed mat that's been your bed for years. You're 16 now, a lean, scarred product of the Agoge, standing on the edge of manhood in the Spartan training camp. The dawn is soft, the air carrying a rare stillness, as you pull on your tattered cloak for what might be one of the last times. Today's not about drills or tests. It's about reflection, about understanding what the Agoge's brutal legacy has made you and what it means for Sparta. You join the other boys, their faces mirroring your own mix of pride and exhaustion. And the Paidonomos' voice is quieter today. Look back and know who you are. The Agoge, as Plutarch and others recount, isn't just training. It's a crucible that shapes Sparta's soul, producing warriors who carry its legacy. You're sent to a hill overlooking the city, tasked with sitting alone to think on your journey. The view's striking. Red-cloaked Spartans march below. The Eurotas River glints, and the Taygetus Mountains loom like silent judges. You trace your scars, whip marks from the Artemis ritual, bruises from mock battles, cuts from the Cryptia, and remember the boy who arrived here. Soft and scared, he's gone, replaced by someone who can starve, fight, and endure without flinching. But as you sit, the cost creeps in, heavy as the shield you'll soon carry. You think back to the hunger that gnawed at you, that crust of bread you fought for, the figs you stole under moonlight. The Agog taught you to survive on nothing, to see weakness as the enemy. You recall the loneliness, the nights on damp reeds, the family you can barely picture now, Cleon's harsh lessons, the Cryptia's cold blade in your hand, the public jeers during rituals they've all carved you into Sparta's ideal, but left you wondering what's left of you. One boy, back at camp, joked that you're all Sparta's puppets now, and you laughed, but the words stick like thorns. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Spartans believed the Agogi's hardships were a gift from the gods, a divine forge for unbreakable men. You're not sure about gods, but you feel forged hard, sharp, ready. Historians still argue whether the Agogi's legacy was Sparta's strength or its rigidity, dooming it to stagnation. Sitting here, you don't care about debates. You feel the weight of what you've become. A warrior bound to a city that demands everything. You've survived the whippings, the starvation, the isolation, but you wonder if you've lost something you can't name. As the sun climbs, you're called back for a final ceremony. You stand with your pack, reciting oaths of loyalty to Sparta, your voice steady despite the ache in your chest. The elders watch, and for once, there's no whip, no test, just a nod that says you've made it. You're a Spartan now, or close to it, ready to join the ranks of red-cloaked warriors. But as you look at your brothers, their eyes as hollow as yours, you wonder if the Agog's legacy is glory or just survival at a brutal cost. The sun dips low now, casting long shadows over Sparta's valleys, and you feel the day's weight easing like a heavy cloak slipping from your shoulders. You're back in the barracks, lying on that familiar reed mat, the scent of damp earth and sweat softer somehow, less biting. The Agogi's done its work. You're strong, loyal, a piece of Sparta's unyielding machine. But as you breathe slow, the world quiets, and the memories blur. The whip's sting, the hunger's grip, the Cryptia's dark nights. They fade, just for now, into the gentle hum of wind outside, the distant murmur of the Eurotas River. You're safe here, in this moment, your body heavy, your mind drifting like a leaf on a stream. Let the Agogi's lessons rest. You've earned this stillness. Close your eyes, feel the world soften, and let sleep carry you away, whispering that you're enough, just as you are.